Good afternoon or good morning, everybody. Really glad you could all join us again this week. It's Thursday. It's October 10th. It's 1 p.m. Eastern. We are live and we are running through our freight market roundup. Now, if this is the first time joining us, welcome to our weekly ship show. My name is Jason Brand. I am the Director of Outreach and Partner Development here at Supply Chain Solutions. So if you haven't heard of us before, we're a full service supply chain management and transportation management organization. We handle shipments to and from more than 150 countries on a yearly basis, and we literally handle every link in the chain. We absolutely love when a customer's kind of hands us their dilemmas and is like, just let me know what you could do end to end. It's such a fun project. We also started out as a consulting organization, so that kind of just pulls at our strings of how do we approach this properly, and let's really pull on all the levers we can while making it an easy switch for them. So it's never been a better time to reach out to us and figure out, hey, am I doing the right thing going into 2025? Can't believe I'm saying that right now, but this is what we're talking about. This is what we're focused on. So great time to reach out. You can always find us on our website, or you can reach out to me directly. You can also leave a comment under the video, and one of our account managers can get a hold of you and learn more. So as I mentioned, this week we're talking about our freight market roundup. We refer to this as our FMR, but it's a broad stroke view of the shipping market from a U.S. viewpoint. We are going to run through what our customers are currently paying in ocean rates and air rates. And also we're going to talk about some of the current events or some of the current changes in the marketplace that are going to be affecting how we do our jobs or how you ship effectively. And today we've got a couple interesting ones, but honestly, if you can't watch us right now, remember we're on all major platforms when it comes to podcasts, so you can catch us whenever. But without further delay, let's dive right into it, starting with those ocean rates. So in the Trans-Pacific, and we're going to specifically talk about shipments coming out of Southeast Asia, but really China and headed to the U.S. West Coast at this point. So rates have remained unchanged, and this is due to the Golden Week holiday that's currently going on. Our customers are paying an average of $5,400 per 40-foot container unit, aka FEU, and that's almost identical to what they were paying at the end of September. Now, we were expecting this price to rise, and we are expecting this price to rise slightly, especially because of everything happening on the U.S. East Coast, but it's likely not going to change as much as it could. Golden Week leading up to it, we saw some signals of much lower demand than we were expecting. So, we likely will see a bump up in this price. There's a lot of reasons behind this. Obviously, we've got the ILA, but then at the same time, we've got just Hurricane City on the East Coast. And, both of these will factor into that. But still, given the time period of the year, we're actually expecting this to, after a slight rise, stay steady for a little bit. So we'll see how that goes. But let's continue. Let's keep that same origin, talking about China. Now we're going to shift over to the U.S. East Coast ports. So right now, our shipments heading on this lane are coming in at about $6,350 per 40-foot equivalent unit. Now remember, this is not to your door. We're just talking about the ocean portion of the shipment. So that is the ocean line item. Now, just like our West Coast shipments, prices have really remained unchanged. This is because of Golden Week. Now, let's wrap up this Trans-Pacific. Let's talk about those Southeast Asia and China shipments that are headed into the Mexican West Coast. And drum roll, Golden Week, remember. So it's staying basically the same. But right now, the price is around $3,600 per FEU. And quite frankly, the rates on this lane headed into the West Coast of Mexico, that is from China as an origin, are plummeting. This is a very low point for this lane. And again, we have viewed this as the canary in the coal mine for the West Coast ports as well. Tends to kind of make a shift a little early, and then you can kind of see the West Coast follow. But again, we have a lot of things going on at this moment. This is kind of a pause period. Next week, we're really going to see some of the effects start to take place. So we're going to have to keep watching this and keep you in the loop. Now, we're going to switch gears off our Trans-Pacific. We're going to move over to our Transatlantic. And we're going to focus on shipments that are leaving European ports and headed into the U.S. East Coast. So since the start of October, shipments leaving European ports and headed into the U.S. East Coast, they saw a sharp increase in price, which you would expect. Now, end of September, our customers were paying an average of $2,300 per 40-foot equivalent unit, or FEU. Now, as of this week, we're looking at around a 30% higher price of 3,000 per FEU. Quite frankly, it could be a lot higher. So, and given what we've seen happen in this lane, this is actually pretty reasonable. Still 30% jump, but that was to be expected. Now, for our shippers that have been shifting to the West Coast ports, heading out of Europe, but going to the West Coast to kind of avoid some of the things happening here. Right now, the average cost per FEU has been around the $4,500 mark. So $4,500 per 40-foot equivalent unit. And it is obviously more expensive on the surface, but when you factor in the port congestion surcharges, which we are expecting to be added onto those quotes, at least for the next couple of weeks, really your West Coast routing options are actually cheaper of the two. Now, that is a loaded comment, clearly. Obviously, there is just one of a series of factors you have to consider when making any switches. And you've got your inland transportation, which, not going to dive into this right now, but it's very well positioned currently on the West Coast. If you're considering it, we would love it because, heading into the East Coast right now is a little messy. But before you make any switches or before you consider making any switches, you should have a discussion with your logistics team to run through just what that would look like first, or make sure you reach out to us and we can kind of walk you through what that change would entail and obviously give you a clear price to what that would cost you. Now, let's keep moving along. China, Southeast Asia shipments heading into European ports. Remember, this used to be the Suez Canal lane. A couple carriers have announced they will not even be offering Suez Canal throughout 2025. That's a pretty recent statement and a pretty bold statement. But now remember, when you're shipping out of China here, again, we've got Golden Week. So we're kind of seeing a freeze in price for the moment. Some of the impacts of what's been happening will show up next week and beyond. So we are seeing this relatively unchanged price of 3,500, but 3,500, which we've mentioned in the past, this lane has been on a very steady and consistent decrease in price week over week. The last point, I mean, obviously, rates in general in the marketplace, they ebb and flow. So you see slight increases and slight decreases. But when you look at the grand trend kind of overlaying this, back in July, we saw the highest rates of the year about the second week in July. And since then, it's basically trended down all the way to 3,500. Now, 3,500 is very significant because it's actually the second lowest price this lane has seen since the beginning of this year. And the lowest price was at 3,200. So we are very close to the 2024 price floor, which is pretty crazy if you consider it. So now, when it comes to highlights for today, it is going to be a quick one because we have got a lot of things we've got to cover in the upcoming weeks, but really we need to data gather on these things before we can reach out to you with a lot of quality content that helps you understand what your just disruption potential is, what your risk potential is, and what you're going into if you're shipping, particularly to the East Coast at this point. But, we've got Hurricane Milton on Florida, but we also have Hurricane Kirk and its impact on Western Europe. And also we've got the ILA, and who's obviously in this temporary contract extension, and how that's affecting just the workflow and how that's actually shifting over time. What are we expecting in January? All of this is incredibly important. But again, we're going to be covering this in the next few weeks. Stay tuned for that. Today, I want to talk about something else, though. I want to talk about some of the massive changes that are coming down the line to the ocean shipping companies and really how this is going to affect their operations in 2025. So there's a couple really big notable changes that have been announced. First, we've got MSC, which, as a reminder, will be officially leaving their 2M alliance with Maersk as of January of next year. I believe it's January 25th. But both companies, they're still really not operating as the 2M alliance, even though they are. They've been really winding down all their interconnected services for many months now. It is down to the bare bones point. And actually, in the last couple of weeks, these companies have begun releasing their future plans. Their future plans for 2025. And I've got to tell you, it is quite frankly very, very exciting. Shippers are going to have a lot of interesting options and just new ways of approaching ocean freight transportation. Quite frankly, it's going to be very interesting. And I can't wait to test out some of these new services with our customers and see just how well they deliver. So first, let's talk about MSC, who had the really most notable single biggest change, and that's the fact they're going to be alliance free. Now, that's not a common thing in today's world. And really, that was only made possible from just an absolutely massive order book that they accrued during those profit-heavy years of the pandemic. You know, it the great news about being alliance free is the alliances were targeted with a lot of government regulation, particularly from the US. So being in an alliance free standpoint, you can kind of dodge some of that. But another huge benefit is just operational fluidity. They can change their network without having to consult anyone else in their alliance. They aren't tied to certain locations or certain services because of alliance agreements. So there is a lot more operational fluidity. And this kind of goes to the core of what they believe their new kind of focus is and what their network strategy can be characterized as, which in one word is going to be called decentralization. So their CEO, Soren Toft, had a quote at a conference just in the past 2 weeks. And it's, this is kind of it roughly put together, but MSC, they've decided to have extensive port coverage because one of the trends they're seeing is that supply chains are changing. Toft went on to say that these supply chains are no longer as centric as they used to be, and they're seeing that shippers have started sourcing from a wider array of origin companies, almost to be careful not to have all their eggs in one basket. So, and this is very fascinating. Obviously, we've been talking about this for a while. We've seen the risks of this for a while. These lumbering corporations and tied down to those alliances have a hard time reacting to those shifts in where you're supplying from. And unfortunately, sometimes that difficulty for carriers to shift effectively makes some regions that could be excellent suppliers for your organization just not cost competitive because of the transportation costs or because of the lack of reliability you can get transportation wise out of certain regions. So, Toft went on to mention because of this diversification, their new network is going to call on 12 ports directly in Asia and 13 more destination ports in Northwest Europe. And he touted that the next largest alliance competitor is going to only have 9 direct Asia destinations and only half or nearly half, 7 in Northwest Europe. So in all, MSC's new strategy is going to offer more than 1,900 direct port connections, which is pretty wild. Now let's kind of move over. So Maersk, in leaving this 2M alliance, they formed the Gemini Alliance with Hapag-Lloyd. And obviously that's not up and running yet. That's happening in 2025, but they're pursuing an extremely different strategy. And they're claiming with this strategy of the Gemini Alliance, they're going to be able to achieve a 90% schedule reliability. And these are numbers we just don't see. So I am very excited to see this play out. But they are taking a different approach. They're taking a very conventionally European approach, I think would be a way of saying it. But yeah, so this strategy that they're pursuing, the Gemini Alliance, they're calling it the hub and spoke network. So it's basically which these major lanes that are serviced are going to be the hub points. And from those hub points, a network of shuttles will form the spokes that will ultimately create the alliance's coverage. And both the shuttles and the terminals in this network they've designed are strategically owned and operated by Maersk and Hapag-Lloyd. So because of this and because of the style of delivery, they're very confident they can dramatically increase their schedule reliability with their shipments. But they're also, a secondary goal of this is they want to virtually eliminate, if not completely eliminate, all blank sailings, which is another thing we've seen a lot of. So it's a lot of obviously we're excited. Let's just put it that way. So 2025 is going to be very interesting from a standpoint of these two very different strategies. But yeah, so let's quick run through some of the hubs. So Felixstowe, that's going to be the British hub. It's going to have 3 weekly calls. The other European hubs will be Rotterdam. They're going to have 4 weekly calls. Hamburg and Bremerhaven, they're going to have 2 weekly calls each, with 1 weekly call at Wilhelmshaven. Apologies if I got that pronunciation wrong. Now in Asia, the hubs themselves are going to be mainly located in China. You're going to have 3 weekly calls at Shanghai, 2 in Ningbo, 2 in Yantian, and 1 in Qingdao. The carriers are going to have 5 weekly calls at Gemini's Malaysian hub of Tanjung and 3 in Singapore. So two very different strategies. And obviously, it's very exciting for the shipping community to just see new options. I really love the combination here, and also the difference. You've got Gemini, who's going to really focus on these hubs. And then obviously the spokes are going to be where they have their variability. And then you've got MSC, who's going for as fluid as possible. We're going to be alliance free. We're going to offer more destinations. And, we're going to change with the market. And that's it. Just between those two strategies, you can see as a shipper that you're going to be able to service your customers better. So we're very excited. And yeah, hey, thank you so much for joining us this week. We have got a lot going on in the next month. We are going to be breaking down what's happening in Florida and just the East Coast in general, because the fallout from Helene and Milton is serious, and it's still getting kind of documented at this point. So as we understand what ports are going to be affected going forward, how this is going to affect equipment, how this is affecting infrastructure, how this is affecting rail service, we're going to be dropping episodes on those. But beyond that, we also have to keep talking about the ILA, because January is fast approaching. And at this point, the contract is not what it needs to be at least going forward. So thanks again. Again, I'm Jason Brand from Supply Chain Solutions, and I'll catch you next week. Make it a great week.